I'll never forget in that moment, he leaned back in his chair and he opened up the top drawer of his desk and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. He showed me that who I was not a problem, it was an opportunity. But he also showed me the opportunity of what could be with that gift. And the cool part about it is I don't really remember a lot of what Mr. Jensen taught me. But one thing's for darn sure, I'll never forget the drumsticks.
Hi everyone! Welcome to episode 11 of the Un+alike podcast. Natalia, we have been keeping a big secret. And everybody who's been watching every week keeps asking the $1 million question. But how do you know each other?
Oh, this is a good one. Do you want me to spill the beans or you?
Well, take it away.
We are sisters. She's my big sister.
I am the big sister. That means I know more because I've been around longer and I've lived longer. But that doesn't mean that I'm the wisest. Yeah. So everything that we have shared to date has been a lot of fun to share with you, and you guys have been so great to ask questions and to chime in and to tell us your stories or your memories of us. We almost spilled the beans a time or two. I remember telling you all the story about when I was going to give birth and Natalia came over to my house to help me get to the hospital because she had already had a baby and this was, I hadn't. I was telling that story and then I got to the point where I needed to explain that she called our mom to say, Krachel won't go to the hospital. And that I was in the middle of talking and all of a sudden I was like, do I say her mom? Do I say my mom? So
it's both
there's
of
been
ours.
A couple times it almost caught up
mom.
with us. We do have the same mom and same dad and all the same brothers
Yes.
and sisters. And we love all of them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
And they're kind of all unalike as well, but we're kind of all the same too.
Yes, we are. And I am naturally this dark. I don't know what color Krachel's hair is naturally, but yes, I really am naturally a lot darker than her.
So that's a lot of fun. We should talk about that. Natalia has always been the darkest person in our family. A dark complexion, dark hair, and she gets approached all the time by people who will start speaking Spanish to her and expect her to respond.
Yes, it's actually transitioned though as I've gotten older. Instead of Spanish, I get spoken to in Portuguese a lot lately. So I don't know if it's my name or what, but I don't know either.
You know, I remember maybe it was episode 2, episode 3, we were starting to get a lot of questions about how do you know each other? And it's funny because it's kind of like this thing people have started to argue about. No, they're not related. Yes, they are. They look like sisters. So it's funny how people are on completely polar opposite sides about this discussion of whether or not we were even related. But
Yeah.
I want to share that every story we have shared so far has been completely true. We did
Yes.
live together. We have had several of the same jobs. We've worked together at a snow cone shack.
Yep.
But before the snow cone shack, we made milkshakes together at one of the best shake shops in the whole state of Utah and maybe all of the Rockies for that matter.
Oh yeah, we did.
So we grew up on a farm, a very small farm. I think you can call it a farm. We had 8 sheep and 4 horses.
And we
so
had
we've
pigs and chickens and cows and dogs and cats and
Yeah.
we had it all.
So we've taken care of farm animals and done some manual labor. But another job people may not realize is we have both worked for a custom curbing company doing cement curbing around flower beds.
I tried to never have that job.
She always got out of the jobs. So after Natalia, we have a brother. And more often than not, I feel like the hard jobs went from me and straight on to our brother. Natalia mastered that skill.
It's all good.
Hey, so we haven't had a chance to talk. I wanted to ask you, didn't you think that interview last week with Jessica was awesome?
Yes, I loved it. And I seriously have gone back and watched her interview a couple of times because she's so inspiring and just her accent is awesome, but everything about her. But I definitely have to tell you that one of the things that I totally thought was hilarious from her interview was when she talked about, I'm going to say this 5 different ways: country fried steak, chicken fried steak, or chicken fried chicken, whatever you want to call it. I think it's all kind of the same thing, either made with chicken or steak. I was laughing so hard that she's never tried that because it's one of my very favorite foods. Like every time I go to Texas Roadhouse, that's what I order. It's like my go-to comfort food. So I couldn't believe that she'd never tried it before.
Yeah, well, and then when she started describing the mashed potatoes and the gravy, even to like bring it back up again right now is making my mouth start to salivate. Like, oh my gosh, I want some country fried chicken right now.
Okay, so we grew up eating a food that was kind of similar, but probably even weirder that most people have probably never had. But we had a lot of them. But this one was finger steaks, which is kind of a play on the same thing, but it's so freaking good. And ever since she even talked about it, I was like on a mission. I have to make finger steaks. So one night this week, I actually made finger steaks for my family for dinner. And finger steaks, for those of you that don't know, we use like a sirloin, like a nice steak, and we chop it up into little pieces, like little strips, like kind of like about the size of a steak fry. And then it's battered in a beer batter and then deep fried. A beer batter, if you haven't had it, it's actually most often used like to batter fish. So it's dipped in that and then deep fried, and it is so bad for you and so good at the same time that I love them. So I had to make those. I'll share the recipe if anybody wants to make them, but that's all because of Jessica. I had to make them.
I justified that it's good for you because there's an entire piece of meat inside, so it's full of protein.
Well, kind of. You know, one other thing, when I made these finger steaks, I like to make them, like I said, with the beer batter, and I think they're better when you use actual beer to make them. So since I had to go to the store and buy some beer, I bought, a few cans, and I also made beer bread this week. Have you ever made beer bread?
No.
It was so good. So this was the first time that I ever made it. I'll share this recipe too. I'm not a great cook, but I do like to, apparently, I guess, make food. It's so good. Really simple ingredients. I actually added honey and cheddar cheese to mine, and even my kids were like, wow. So that was a fun thing we did this week too.
I do know how much time you spend in the kitchen. When you come up with the experimentation ideas, like I'm going to add cheese and I'm going to add honey, is that an idea you come up with on your own, or is that something you've researched online?
Oh, I don't research. Like I find a recipe and then I just like add stuff if I think it's good. And you can't go wrong with honey or cheese. So
I just am getting a better look at how that brain of how your brain works and what's going on, how it's all spinning up in there. Just throw a little of this, throw a little of that.
Yeah, why not? Worst thing that happens is it doesn't taste good.
Well, I remember being excited to make that same finger steak recipe with my new husband, and his kids were over. One of the boys was over. And so we make it sound like it's this kind of weird thing, but if you stop and think about it, it's breaded steak meat, right? It's the same concept as chicken fingers, chicken nuggets. It's just we're using steak meat to do it. Yeah. So if you think about it like that, you realize it's not as weird as it sounds, but you're now making your own homemade chicken or steak, whatever you prefer. And on that note, I have done chicken a few times and dipped and breaded the chicken, and it cooks just the same. So we have done some homemade chicken nuggets. Yeah. But anyway, so with the steak, I made that for Dustin and Ryan when Ryan was up here at the house. And it's always fun for me to watch the kids because I know I'm introducing them to things they haven't had before. And Ryan is my favorite. Like, he's a very polite, very, very polite 14-year-old. And so you can always tell by looking at his face how he really feels. He won't say it. He won't let the words come out, but his face completely gives it away. Well, when I made finger steaks, he asked for seconds. And that's how you always know. he doesn't always just say, oh, this is really good. But if he asks for seconds, you know that you're good.
That I definitely always eat seconds. They are so good.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, what have you been working on this week over there with that brain of yours and all of the quilting that's going on?
It's always something crazy, and who knows what I might be working on. But this week I did have a little bit of time to spend with my best friend, my quilting machine. And I quilted a really fun giraffe quilt. Remember how we talked about a few weeks ago about my spirit animal? Well, I quilted this really fun giraffe for my client, Heather, and it's awesome. The quilt itself is incredible, but I had a lot of fun quilting it, and I loved it. I've actually quilted, so this isn't a giraffe. It looks like an actual giraffe that she's pieced into this quilt, but I've actually quilted for Heather as well, an elephant and also a lion. These are super incredible quilts and way fun for me to machine quilt.
Just out of curiosity, when you're quilting, and I've seen some of these questions over on your social media page, when you get something really unique like that, this giraffe that's laid out on a background of blue squares and patches and triangles that are all different shapes, a lot of people ask you, where do you get your ideas? How do you decide this entire block is going to be straight lines done with a ruler, but this entire block is going to be swirls and pebbles and feathers? How do you figure it all out?
My process is so, I don't even know what the word is to describe it. It's every quilt, because they're all, pretty much everything that I quilt is custom quilting. So every single quilt I look at individual and decide from there. I'm going to kind of plug myself for a second. I actually have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Natalia Bonner. So it's this page where I actually share more in-depth step-by-step videos showing my process. And I start with the beginning and show a photo of the quilt and show, this is the quilt, this is what I'm thinking, and then I take you to my machine and walk you through my process, start to finish quilting a quilt. So I share those over on Patreon, but part of me doing that is showing that not every single quilt is the same. There's not really like a one size fits all that I look at it and I say, I want this thing to stand out, because like we're talking about, this giraffe quilt is so different from like a quilt with stars, this one behind me that has all these stars on it. So you can't even really approach them in the same way. I don't know how to explain my brain.
Yeah. Well, that's why I ask, because it's always fascinating to see what you come up with. And now that our secret is out and everyone knows that we are sisters who are completely opposite, then I can openly say, I do not quilt. I do not sew. Mm-hmm. I did thread a needle this week, so everybody give me some kudos for that. But I don't quilt.
Yes.
So I, as an outsider, sit and watch you use your gamble machine and freehand all of this stuff. And even those of us who are not quilters can be completely fascinated and mesmerized by the work that you do. It is almost like putting a trance over us, like one of those little balls that sits and kind of does this to you. But that's what it's like to watch you. Something sucks you in. And for those of us who are watching, just for all of you who are not quilters, I know we do have a lot of quilters who follow this podcast, but for everyone who is not a quilter and doesn't have that same appreciation for quilting, kind of like me. I mean, I get it, but so do me a favor and go check her out on YouTube. Go check her out. She has a TikTok channel, you guys. She has a TikTok channel and she shows herself quilting. If you do not believe me, do me a favor this week. You all have a homework assignment. Go check Natalia out and you will see what I'm talking about.
Okay, so I have to tell you something funny. Speaking of TikTok, I think it was maybe the first, maybe the second video I ever posted on TikTok. I don't know what TikTok is, really. I don't dance. I'm not the TikTok dancing grandma. I am so uncoordinated, but I was like, why not post a video of myself quilting on TikTok? So we did. I had my daughter film it. We posted it. So not the normal, and I guess it went viral. It had over 30 million views, or it has right now, and it's like, wow, I guess really what you're saying, people of all different types of or walks of life are mesmerized by machine quilting.
You guys,
crazy.
30 million views on TikTok of somebody quilting.
Crazy.
Do you not understand and appreciate how crazy Jinx. How crazy that is.
No, I can't even imagine 30 million like that. It's too big.
There's no way to describe it. Just go check it out. Mm-mm. And if you don't have TikTok, call your kids.
Right.
Okay, something
so
fascinating.
What have you been up to?
I'm going to tell you. I'm more of the nerd in this relationship. So I've been looking at some of our stats, and I hadn't looked at these. So I didn't know, but I was very surprised when I opened them up and saw where all of our listeners are. Where do you think all of our, we've made it very clear, we film in Utah in the United States, but where do you think we have listeners located?
The internet's a big world, and I don't know. I haven't actually looked, so I'm way fascinated to see or hear where our friends are from.
Well, I was surprised. I might be a little sheltered. I kind of thought this podcast had not gone much beyond, I don't know, the lower 48 states of the U.S. So join me and let your jaw drop as I tell you where our listeners are. United States, Canada, Australia, Denmark, New Zealand, Switzerland, Germany,
awesome.
Ecuador, South Africa. Natalia, we are speaking and sharing stories. We have listeners watching right now, just what you said, all around the globe. This community is so much smaller than we ever realized. We had no idea until I did a little bit of research. But to each of you who have been watching and who've come back week after week and followed along and taken an hour out of your time to spend time with us, I just want to give you a huge shout out and say thank you. We are so tickled and completely honored that you would be willing to spend an hour of your week with us. So thanks for being here.
Yes. And leave a comment and tell us where you're from.
Tell us something funny or something fun that's going on in your world. We love to hear from you, and we love to hear the fun things that are going on. So share something positive that we can all follow along and read about.
Yes.
Okay. We're very, very excited about today's guest. He is our unalike hero, and he is also the first male we've had on the show. We have not been intentionally avoiding the male species. It just has worked out that a few people we've called to be on the show so far have all been female. So we are so excited to introduce the one and the only Emmy Award-winning speaker, actor, author, drummer, airline pilot, the one, the only, the amazing Clint Pulver. For Natalia and I, he's the kid next door. And so she joined me this week to catch up and find out how Clint's doing. We are so excited to be here today with Clint Pulver. I've asked Natalia to join me for this interview because, as it turns out, she knows him from a long time ago. We both know him from a long time ago, but Natalia, I just learned you know him in a very intimate manner.
I do. And I'm going to jump in here really quick and just embarrass Clint before we even get started.
Man. Oh, geez. Here we go.
Okay. When I was a teenager, I had this little part-time-ish job. I don't even know what you call it, but I would get off the school bus once or twice a week at the Pulver home and babysit Clint and his brother from the time they got out of school until in the evening. I don't even know what time it was, but it was after they were supposed to be in bed. So this is the way that I would totally describe Clint as a child when I was babysitting him. Oh. He was the most perfectly naughty little boy.
Yes, that sounds exactly right.
So I would go to their home and everything was always in order. His mom and her organizing skills were top notch. So it was always fun to go there. They were good boys. They never did anything. Like, it was a really easy and fun babysitting job. So I'm sure their bedtime was like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or something. And every single night I would say, okay, it's bedtime. And Clint would help me get his brother into bed. And then he would go get into his bed. And then he would hurry and sneak out and talk me into letting him stay up late. and he would teach me how to play Atari, which I had no idea how to play. I don't even think I knew what Atari was before I met them.
Such a great time.
And he would sit on, they had like this window seat kind of thing, and Clint would sit there and look out the blind. And as soon as his mom and dad would pull in, he would just run to bed. And I don't think they ever knew. I never told. So
That was the plan. That was it. It's like, you let me stay up, I'll make sure that they know that you put me in bed at time, and that'll be perfect.
it was so much fun. Seriously, one of my favorite childhood memories was babysitting you guys.
That is awesome. I told Krachel, we need to get you a t-shirt. I survived babysitting Clint Pulver.
It was a lot of fun, really.
It's awesome.
Clint, how good are you on the Atari today?
You know, it's been a while. It's been a while since I played the old Atari. My dad still has the set, though. So next time I'm up there, we're going to have to do a little Atari return. Awesome.
Well, we know that this has been a crazy year for everybody, but public speakers as well. So how's the year been treating you, Clint?
It's been crazy, to be honest. March 6th was my last live public speaking event when the world, I would say, was still normal. And then we watched literally in a matter of 2 weeks as my whole industry just disappeared, fell apart. Obviously, live events and big conferences and large social gatherings aren't happening anytime soon. So it's been a really difficult time. But it's also been a unique time, and it's been a time for opportunity, not just problems. And so it's been fun to pivot and innovate and to get creative.
You're doing a lot now through Zoom and finding ways to still speak and engage audiences virtually, correct?
Yeah, I'm speaking right now in our virtual studio. We've got multiple cameras, and we're doing all sorts of different things to make it more of an engaging, exciting experience. And good audio and lighting and mixers and streaming equipment, and yeah, to still be able to bring a message to people and still help and uplift and add value. We're just doing it all virtually now.
One of the amazing things of millennials today is the ability to adapt and to accept change, and that's something you've definitely rolled with.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think it was that moment where, well, we're either going to die as a business or we're going to adapt. And it was an opportunity to kind of really get creative. We've created something here that we wouldn't have done had the pandemic not happened. And I still miss being on stage. I still miss speaking to a live audience. But man, there's nothing like doing something like this, and then I leave and I'm here in my home, and I get to go and snuggle my little baby, and I'm home every night, and to be with my family. So there's definitely been a lot of pros amongst the disruption.
I know you've got a couple of specialty stories, but one of those that I think might be, in fact, I'm going to call it your signature story, talks about an experience that you yourself had as a child, roughly 10 years old. Tell us a little bit about what happened when you were a young fifth grader.
So I was the kid that when I would go to school, I didn't struggle with science or English. I just struggled holding still. I was always moving. You know, Natalia could probably attest to this. I had a lot of energy, and I would sit there and I would try to focus in class, and my right hand would start to move and my left hand would start to tap, and I just did it. And I constantly got in trouble for it. I was nicknamed the Twitcher. Kids would call me the Tapper all the time in class. I got sent to the principal's office. The principal told me to just sit on my hands, and that worked for like 5 seconds. And my feet would start tapping. I was constantly deemed a problem by everybody, because that's annoying, right? And nobody wants to be around someone that's constantly doing that. But I've always believed, though, in the power of moments. I think if we look at our lives and what makes it a great story, it's the moments. Some of them are hard, some of them are epic, but it's the significance of those experiences that make them moments. And that's what writes your story. And I'll never forget this moment where there was my fifth grade teacher. His name was Mr. Larry Jensen. And he told me to stay after class. And the bell rang. Everybody's gone. It's a completely empty room, me and Mr. Jensen. And he sat me down and he said, "Listen, do you know why I asked you to stay after class?" And I said, yeah, it's because I tap. It's because I move. And he said, listen, I've watched you. I watch what you do. It's crazy. He said, you're what we call ambidextrous. And I'm like, what? I was like, no, I'm a Presbyterian. And he's like, no, that's not what it means. He's like, you're ambidextrous. He's like, you have independence over your limbs. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, can you tap your head and rub your belly at the same time? And I could do that. And he goes, can you switch it? He said, can you rub your head and then tap your belly? And literally, without thinking about it, I just naturally could do that. And he leaned forward and he looked at me and he said, Clint, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer. And I'll never forget, in that moment, he leaned back in his chair and he opened up the top drawer of his desk and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. My very first pair. And changed my life. It was a moment that communicated two things: my potential and my worth. He showed me that who I was not a problem, it was an opportunity. But he also showed me the opportunity of what could be with that gift. And I'll never forget, he handed me the drumsticks and he said, Clint, I want you to take them and just keep them in your hands. And let's just see what happens. And that was 22 years ago. And I can honestly say today that from this time, 22 years ago, to where we are today, I've tried my best to keep my promise to Mr. Jensen. For 22 years, I've had the opportunity to tour and record all over the world playing drums. I started the first drum line at Wasatch High School. I started the first drum line at Utah Valley University. I've been on America's Got Talent. I remember I went to college and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I graduated with a bachelor's degree and zero college debt. And that was from music scholarships. And I don't say all those things to go, oh, wow, good for you, Clint, or that's amazing. I say those things because of one person who created a moment that ended up changing a life. And yeah, Mr. Jensen is still alive to this day. There's a picture of me and Larry. I call him Larry now. And yeah, he totally changed everything just with a simple pair of drumsticks.
Do you still have that set of drumsticks?
I shredded them. I practiced with those things so much. And they quickly fell apart. When we play, they just, most of the time the sticks break. And so
Yeah.
I think I had them for maybe a month or two. And I needed new sticks.
Has he signed a new set for you?
He actually hasn't, and I probably should do that.
Yeah.
We talk fairly often, and he's always asking what I'm up to and what I'm doing with my life. And
Sure.
yeah, he's just an instrumental person that, yeah, just a small moment that made such an impact.
I know that when you share this story up on stage in front of thousands of people, CEOs, business leaders, parents, school kids, you turn to the audience and you ask them, how do you create those moments that truly change people's lives? I think you issue that as a challenge to them. Do you have some ideas for everyone listening and watching us right now? Aside from handing out a set of drumsticks, what are other things that we can do to create these moments that truly change people's lives?
I think it depends on where you're at in your life, your sphere of influence, right? If you're a CEO versus a mom or a dad, or a manager versus a teacher, the environment is going to be a little bit different. However, the universal principle of making sure that people are seen, heard, and understood is still applicable. It still applies. It's a universal truth. My business now, 5 years ago, I started what's called the Undercover Millennial Program. And I go undercover into organizations as a millennial who's looking for a job. It's kind of like Undercover Boss without the makeup.
Yeah, right.
And I go up to the employees and I say, hey, I'm just thinking about applying. What's it like to work here? And like, it gets awkward and they kind of look around and it feels like a drug deal. And then all of a sudden they tell me everything. Everything. They tell me the good, they tell me the bad, they tell me what's working and what's not working. But the magic of all of the research was when I would ask an employee and say, what's it like to work here? And they would respond with, I love it here. I love my job. I love what we're doing. I love my manager. I love my teacher. And it was interesting. I think that some of the greatest moments are made through mentorship, not management. What I mean by that is advocating for people, not just developing people.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest moments always revolve around the individual. And that's what we remember, right? We don't remember days, we remember moments, because the moments had something to do with us. And if you're a parent listening to this, every one of your kids is always asking you the question, let me know when it gets to the part about me, Mom. Or let me know when it gets to the part about me, Dad. And sometimes we hear that and then we go, those entitled little shining stars in my life, right? Like, let me know when it gets to the part about me. And
Yeah.
it's not so much about entitlement as it is about like good business, good parenting, bringing humanity into the classroom, getting to the part about people. And I look at the moment that Mr. Jensen created and I go, what made that so significant? What made that so special? And it really comes down to those two things. It communicated my potential and my worth to the point where I saw it within myself. All Mr. Jensen did is he told me what he saw when he looked at me. And second, he told me what he saw me becoming. If you want to create a moment with an individual, tell them what you see when you look at them. You know, think about it. When's the last time you sat down with your child and you just said, hey, listen, Lindsay, Brittany, Mike, John, I just want you to know, like, when I look at you, like, I just want you to know, I see this. I see how good you are. I see how hard you're trying in school. I see how kind you are with the other kids. Like tell them what you see. Because I've worked with kids long enough in my career. Man, most of the time, they're not telling themselves positive things. They're not thinking positive thoughts. The Hawthorne Institute did a study 3 years ago. They found that an adult will have anywhere from 15,000 to 60,000 thoughts in a day.
Sure.
People are like, I only have 12 a day. But on average, 15,000 to 60,000 thoughts. But what they also found is that 80% of those thoughts are negative. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not pretty enough. I don't sit at the cool table at lunch. I only got 56 likes on my Insta pic when I usually get 400, right? Some of those things might seem trite, but if we take 80% of negativity and then you compound that day after day, it's easy to lose sight of who you are. It's easy to lose sight of what's possible. So tell people what you see when you look at them. Sometimes we just need somebody to believe in us, somebody to point it out. And then the second thing is tell them what you see them becoming. That's what he did for me. I saw it as a problem. I saw myself being teased. I saw myself as a victim. He helped me to become a victor. He helped me to become the hero in the story. He gave me drumsticks and said, this is cool. This is something. He gave me belonging. I love this. I wasn't going to do this, but we might as well. This saying, it says, opportunities are found within the problems. All right, you two, help me out with this.
Okay.
Say this with me at the same time. You ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Opportunities are found within the problems.
Nice. Awesome. Except for that it doesn't say that.
Okay.
Watch, let's try it again.
Okay.
Opportunities
are
found
within
the
what?
Look at that.
I got me.
Mind blown, right? You're like, what is
Yes.
this? Some like magic show? No. It's just about perspective, right? There's two.
Yeah.
And I didn't change the font. I didn't change the color, but they're there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Clint. Yeah.
It's crazy, right? Mm-hmm. And that right there, that's like a little moment, right? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I see something that I never saw before.
Sure.
That's how we do it, is we help them see things that they couldn't see within themselves. And when you do that, you become influential. You become memorable. You become a Mr. Jensen.
I love that in your mind, you had already given yourself a label, probably without realizing it. Mr. Jensen helped you to see that there was no label, and in fact, that there was so much more.
And the cool part about it is I don't really remember a lot of what Mr. Jensen taught me as a kid. Sure. I really don't. But one thing's for darn sure, I'll never forget the drumsticks.
Yeah, you'll never forget how he made you feel.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah. So moving past 5th grade, now you've got the drumsticks and things are kind of being figured out. Another thing you needed to figure out was what to do when I grow up. And you said even getting through school, you had the music scholarship and you had the passion for music. And I know that you loved drumming, but it wasn't the only thing that you loved.
Yeah, you're right. I loved aviation. I loved flying. Like being a pilot, like nothing sounded cooler to me. I was literally the kid that had every airplane and helicopter you could buy from Toys R Us. It was hanging from my ceiling. I loved it, and I wanted to fly, and I graduated high school with my private pilot's license. And then I left and served a 2-year mission for my church, and I came home, and I had to renew my driver's license. It's a horrible experience.
That
every
happens
time,
around the
DMV.
time you turn 21, 22.
Yep, exactly. And I went into the DMV, and it was literally like Disneyland in the summertime, and I didn't have a fast pass. There was lines for days, and I waited and I waited, and finally the lady, she called my number, and I walked up, and then she, tells you to put your head in that little black box for the vision test.
Yeah.
And I went over and I put my head in there, and the screen went white, and I could only see 6 little black dots. And she's like, read the letters. And I'm like, I just see black dots. And she's like, no, you got to push harder. And I'm like, listen, lady, like I'm pushing as hard as I can. And she's like, just read them out loud. And I'm like, I'm not seeing them. Can I go to another machine?
Yeah.
Eventually, she comes around the counter and she pushes me out of the way, and she puts her head in the black box and she reads out loud, CKGELFWZYN.
Clearly
And she
there's a
looks at-
problem.
Yeah, and she looks at me and she says, listen, can you read? And I'm like, ma'am, come on. Like, yes, I can read. She's like, well then, honey, I think you're blind.
Wow.
And I'm like, listen, I drove here today. Like, I see you right now. And she said, well, you're not driving back.
Oh my gosh, no way.
And yeah, she took us, I'll never forget, it was another moment, and she took a big stamp and in red pushed it on my paperwork, and it said denied driving privileges.
Wow.
I didn't pass the vision test. I was under house arrest at the DMV. My mother had to come and pick
You
me up.
called your mom.
Yep. Long story short, I ended up at the Moran Eye Center at the University of Utah, and I sat with one of the top leading authorities in a rare and degenerative eye disease known as keratoconus. And I had it bad. My eyes as a 21-year-old kid were as bad as an 87-year-old's. And keratoconus is a degenerative disease, and my corneas were dying. My corneas were getting thinner and thinner. And I'll never forget, he sat me there and he said, Clint, you'll be blind by the age of 31, 32. You're going to lose your sight. And then he asked, he said, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I said, I want to fly.
I can't wait to get in the sky. I'm going to fly airplanes.
Yeah, and he's like, listen, kid, it's never going to happen for you, ever. And it was really hard, because there I was as a young kid who had my eye on the sky, and then I watched in a moment as the sky fell in all around me. And that was really tough. And what do you do? What do you do when you have a plan, right? You have a dream, you have a goal, and then something out of your control happens, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's the same thing like what happened with the coronavirus, right? And COVID.
Yeah.
This came out of nowhere and disrupted our business. There's a film, it's called Shawshank Redemption.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in there,
Little
in that
known
movie,
film.
there's a quote that says you can get busy living or you can get busy dying. And I had a mentor in college, and he told me, he said, Clint, there's a quote that I want to share with you. It's by Oscar Wilde. And it says, to live is the rarest thing in the world. For most people just exist. And I just didn't want to exist.
Yeah.
And I got busy creating a new life, right? You get busy living or you get busy dying. And I wanted to live, and I ended up going to school, and I actually went into the medical field, graduated, and I went to 3 years of specialized med school and became an orthopedic specialist. I worked in that world, but hated it. I wasn't fulfilled. I was just existing every day. I had the benefits, the job, the stability. But I remember, this is kind of an important, really quick part of this story that I think is worth mentioning, because I was sitting with 2 buddies.
Yeah.
And I said, wouldn't it be crazy if you could find a job, a career that allowed you to do 3 things.
Okay.
And the 3 things were this. Number 1, what if it allowed you to play to your passions? Like you really felt good about it. You loved it. It was something, man, if you had 3 hours on a Saturday, you would do this, right? If money were no option, you would do this. And number 2, what if you could provide for your family, right? What if you could provide in a way that was sufficient for you? And then number 3, what if it contributed to your purpose in life?
So
That when you did
passion,
this thing,
provide, and purpose.
you got it. The three P's. And my buddies were like, I don't think that exists. I don't think you can find those 3 P's in one job.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think you're right. And two weeks after that conversation, I quit my job in the medical field and I jumped into the world of professional speaking full time. And it was the career, it was the job, it was the calling in my life that fulfilled those 3 P's. And I can honestly say the moment that I quit my job and jumped into this world was the moment I started living.
I know that another one of your favorite quotes is one by Mark Twain. And that quote says, there are 2 important days in our life. And those are the day you were born and the day you figure out why.
Totally. I think when we die, or all, it doesn't matter what you do in this life, none of us are getting out alive, right?
Right.
It's just part of life. But I think when that moment comes, you're going to be surrounded in that room, in that place. You're going to be surrounded by 2 things. You're going to be surrounded by the woulda, shoulda, couldas, or you're going to be surrounded by the do it, did it, done it's. What it comes down to, right, is why are you here? What were you put here for? And I get that sometimes people might hear that and they go, it's motivational fluff, and I've got bills to pay, man. Like, I've got responsibility. I've got mouths to feed. I get that. But also, do you understand, too, I would say to people that say that, do you realize that 80% of people hate what they do for a living? Gallup, recent poll 2 years ago, 80% of people aren't fulfilled by their jobs.
Yeah.
And I believe that's why I'm so passionate about in creating greater workplaces and building loyalty that lasts and building organizations where people like themselves best because they're at work. And when we create a better opportunity full of moments and purpose and passion, and we also provide an ability for people to provide for their families, I believe that dads go home and they become better fathers, right?
Yeah.
Moms are able to be better mothers. We raise better children. We find more fulfillment in life. And I just, life is too short. And so it's been really fun to jump into that world. And 6 years ago, I got a phone call from the Moran Eye Center, and they just came out with a new human trial for a new procedure with people with my eye disease. And I was number 42 on the list.
Wow. Okay.
And they did the procedure on my right eye, and then they did the procedure 6 months after that on my left eye. And it 100% stopped the progression of the disease.
Oh my gosh.
And am I a full-time pilot now and flying for a life flight or some airline or something? No, I'm not. But I did learn that sometimes good things fall apart so that better things can fit together.
Yeah.
And I think when we choose to see the opportunities and not the problems, that's what helps us to progress. And there's always opportunities, despite how hard or difficult it is. You still get to live a life by design, not by default. And I'm grateful for those moments and the opportunity that I've had to strive to do that.
Sitting on the bench with your friends, they made a bet that it wasn't possible to find the 3 Ps. You have indeed found them, and today are loving what I believe truly was your calling in life, and it is sharing your message through being a public speaker. So Clint, to date, you have given over 3,000 keynote addresses. You have spoken in 47 states. The only 3, just as a fun fact, the only 3 you have not yet been invited to, Alabama, Maine, and New Hampshire. Let's give Clint a call.
Make it happen.
Let's make it happen. You've spoken all around the world, of course, around the country. But in addition to the United States, you have spoken in Dubai, in Ireland. You've touched people in Thailand. You've reached out to people in Guatemala, the British Islands, and Australia. You have literally become a worldwide sensation, sharing your message, helping people to understand their worth and to be the best you. When you speak, when you give these keynote addresses, when you stand up on a stage with 3,000 or 4,000 people in the room, many CEOs and business leaders, one of the most memorable parts about what you do has to do with pulling a pair of drumsticks out of your pocket. So what happens?
Yeah, we show up to an event and nobody knows that I'm a drummer. And I tell the story of Mr. Jensen third person, and then we do take the drumsticks out, and then we reveal a drum set live on stage. And I sit down and we rock the house. And the cool part is they get to see the power of influence, right? Sometimes
Sure.
we don't always see that. That one moment where you said the right thing at the right time, or you decided to smile at that random person on the street, and that's what they needed during that time. We don't always know the impact. And so it's a really cool opportunity that we get to show the audience that even though we don't see it, it still matters, and it's still needed. And you get to be that person. And then we play the drums, and it's always a party.
Well, we've talked about it long enough. I don't think we should make our audience wait any longer. Are you willing to pull out some drumsticks for us today?
Yes, absolutely. Let's make it happen.
gosh, Natalia, can you believe that?
He is awesome, isn't he?
I could listen all day. Well, not just listen, Clint, you're so much fun to watch. And the energy, I can only imagine the energy that you bring to a room every time you step on stage. It has to be amazing.
Well, thank you. We try our best. It's fun to influence, right? It's fun to spark ideas, but it's also fun to entertain and engage people. So it's been a great opportunity.
I can only imagine that when you finish a performance like that, you've got to be, I can't believe that you can come out of that and then be able to continue talking and to go on with the keynote address. Do you have any breath left?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely winded. I got to stop eating Twinkies. That's probably, I'm calling this the poundemic. It's not the pandemic. It's been the
poundemic. That's
poundemic for me. So
yeah. Well, you are working on a new book now, and I want to hear all about it. I also want to hear where people can go to get it.
It's based off of all of the undercover research that I have done for the last 5 years and how great leaders were those influential people. And it's a great book that would be applicable to parenting, to education, to business. They're all universal principles and they're a part of what you're doing. Then this is the book. And it's all based off of the solution-based principles from the eyes of the employees when their leaders were getting it right. And you can get it on Amazon right now. It's available for pre-sale. The launch of the book is in April. So we're really looking forward to that. So
yeah, that's great.
Excited.
Very exciting. Some people can start putting that on their Christmas list. Clint, where can people go if they want to learn more about you or follow you online?
Instagram's awesome. LinkedIn is also a great place, but I hang out on Instagram a lot and love it. So say hello on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, we really thank you for being here with us today. It's been so much fun to catch up and to hear your inspirational stories. Thank you for sharing with us and giving us some ideas and definitely some things to consider for everyone who listened today or who tuned in to watch over on our YouTube channel. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I want to thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Appreciate you both.
Natalia, I cannot believe you never told me that you used to be his babysitter.
I was his babysitter. He, I have to tell you, was the most perfectly naughty little boy I've ever babysat in my whole entire life. I had so much fun tending him as a child. It was actually kind of a weekly job that I would go and tend Clint and his brother Jaron, and I've loved watching him just grow up and turn into this awesome person. I feel like I'm a proud aunt or something over here that's just so proud of everything that he's done.
Yeah. Well, we were really tickled that he was willing to come on to the show and to share his stories with us and to give us that small concert. It was the best week. So thank you, everybody, for being here with us. We really hope that if this is your first time stopping by, you'll stick around, go back and watch episode 1 and then catch up. We're working on a really fun episode for next week. We can't wait to catch up with you then. But until then, have a great week.
See you later.